I'm going to call the meeting to order. It is Monday, March 25th, 2024, 6 p.m. or a few minutes after. Sorry for a bit of a delayed start. We had some technical difficulties. This is a meeting of the Charter and Rules Subcommittee of City Council, and we are meeting in chambers at City Hall. I do want to name that you can also access this through live Spanish interpretation on Local Access Channel 15, or through the live stream on the city website, as well as on the Zoom feed by clicking the interpretation option and choosing Spanish. And my name is Meg McGrath-Smith. I'm the chair of Charter and Rules. To my left is City Council President Tessa Marie Boletti.
I get that a lot, yeah.
And also thank you to Councilor Jordan, who's also in chambers tonight. And Patty Devine is joining us, Councilor Devine, on Zoom. Thank you, Councilor Devine. Okay, we're going to get started. I'll entertain a motion to take item 1 off the table.
Motion to take item 1 off the table and approve the minutes of February 5th meeting.
Okay, I'll second that. And is there any discussion?
No, they were very accurate, and I just want to give a shout out to Jeffrey, as always. Thank you. I'll motion to approve the February 5th meeting.
Second. And actually, I don't think we need a roll call vote. We can just do a voice vote because it's just myself and Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti. We are missing Councilor Vacant tonight.
I just texted her, but
So.
Okay.
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 Well, I guess maybe
That's okay.
as a result, I think we just need to do a voice vote though for now because we're all in person. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Let's move to item 2.
Motion to take item 2 off the table.
Second. And let's just open it up for discussion just as a framing. I want to name, I'll read it out first, and then we'll talk about like what is the place that this has in charter versus in other subcommittee bodies. This is from October 4th, 2022, from Murphy-Ramboletti, that the City of Holyoke, through its Honorable City Council and Honorable Mayor, hereby petitions the Massachusetts General Court to enact legislation establishing an appointed treasurer for the City of Holyoke in the forms set forth below. Provided, however, that the General Court may reasonably vary the form and substance of the requested legislation within the scope of the general public objectives of this petition. The petition is an act establishing an appointed treasurer for the City of Holyoke. This act proposes to change the city treasurer from an elected position to an appointed one. The appointment will be made by the mayor with approval of the City Council for a term not to exceed 5 years, and qualifications for the position may be established by ordinance. If adopted, the treasurer elected in the 2023 municipal election will fill the vacancy in the office for the remaining 2 years, and a treasurer will be appointed to the position following the expiration of that term in January 2026, or sooner if the office is vacated. This was taken up and tabled October 24th of 2022, taken up again in conversation July 17th of 2023, referred back to committee August 1st of 2023. So this has been on the table for a while. I do want to say, just in terms of framing, that when I went back in and looked at the Charter Commission, this has been something that has been discussed for a really long time. So the Charter Commission, which failed, I think that was over 10 years ago at this point, also had a version of this. So this has been in the ether for a while. People have been considering this change. And I remember when I went to the Mass Municipal Association training for new counselors and our, kind of finance and budget 101 for new counselors, Holyoke was actually brought up as a model for a city in need of financial restructuring in terms of how there's been this need for years to do some restructuring, but it has not occurred yet. And I do think that one of the main pieces of work in front of the City Council this term is in really us deciding what we think this right restructuring looks like and moving it forward through a process that I think will seem to the public really complicated.
If I may.
Open up for discussion. Yeah.
So thank you, Madam Chair. I filed this order, and I I filed it a while ago. It's something that I talked about a lot when I was campaigning for my first term. And you're right, it is something that has come up often. I think what we as a body and as a city, perhaps, can't really agree on is who should be appointing the treasurer. So I think, honestly, most of the council agrees that the treasurer position shouldn't be elected. And I think we're all pretty much on the same page on that end. Now I think it does come down to the notion of, is it appointed by the mayor? Is it appointed by the council? Does it have mayoral approval with city council confirmation? And that's actually what I hope that this would be. Is, I understand that, and I respect and I believe that the city council should have the authority to help appoint this position. I am of the fundamental belief that this is a position that we shouldn't appoint directly ourselves. And I'm hoping that, subject to city council confirmation, could be the compromise, because in addition to the treasurer position, we also have the auditor, which is appointed by the city council, the tax collector, which is also appointed by the city council, the assessor, which is also appointed by the city council. And on the day-to-day, things can't really be approved or passed through the treasurer's office without the support and oversight of our auditor, which is someone that we do appoint. So my mindset in filing this order that, allows this to be an appointed position by the mayor that is given oversight of the city council, in the sense of it's not going to happen if we don't approve it. And we've seen mayoral appointments that don't get confirmed by the council, and that's the balance of government there. But I think I was motivated by filing this order, not just on the belief that this should be something that the mayor is able to appoint himself, but right now, as it stands, the mayor does not have financial oversight of anyone, really. We, as the city council, have that financial oversight, but also I am also referring to the recommendations that have been given to us by the state. And as Councilor McGrath-Smith mentioned, the state looks to us as one of the examples of this, because even in a business, it's very rare that the CEO of a business does not have financial oversight. So that was my motivation in filing this. I'm hoping that we can see something on the ballot for the next election, which would be great. But thank you for putting it on the agenda, and I'm looking forward to continuing to discuss this.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to speak on this topic? Yes, Councilor Jordan.
Yeah, a couple of things. I agree with pretty much all the sentiments that Tessa just mentioned there. Some things to consider as we meander our way through it. I agree. I think the consensus is that the time has come that this not be elected. I think we're looking for a particular skill set that we cannot leave to a quote-unquote lottery chance at the election, where maybe you get a great person, maybe you don't. And the other thing is, it's not really a position that should just be subject to, hi, I'm, Joe politician, I'm popular, I go to this club and I hang out at this bar, and, all the schmoozy stuff that we politicians do to ingratiate ourselves in the eyes of the electorate. Obviously hopefully it's our competence that keeps us here and people feel that we're doing a good job. But, there's a lot of the stuff we politicians have to do to keep ourselves elected. And all good things, by the way. But as a general rule, that's not the criteria that we're looking for the person that's running the day-to-day treasury. So I'm totally on board with that. I think it does come down to these questions of checks and balances and being sensitive to that. I think we've got a few things to consider. The who appoints, how long. One of the things we also have to put in here now is under the elected framework, the grounds for removal is very simple. You're voted out. We don't have a grounds for removal here, too. If we're going to have appointed, we talk about how you get in the job. We also have to add criteria here as to how you get out of the job. So we should add that in the legal language as to what would be the grounds for your removal, or what would be the process for your removal. Is it the mayor? Based on, the mayor or a majority of the council can say that this person is doing a bad job and this person needs to be removed. Again, it's highlighting the issues that I know some of us have certainly articulated around the recall issue, and I know that's to be filed later because we have to keep building consensus around recall, but there's been concerns about the 4-year positions that, we've had problems with some elected positions where people didn't, certainly in the eyes of many, fit the bill, that they were not doing a good job. Either the IG has come in and said they're not doing a good job, and, we've had to subject those people to scrutiny. As a matter of fact, one of the things that you'd say, well, we just figure it out. We had a problem with appointed doesn't solve this as a dilemma. Let me give you for example. We had issues years ago with the 3-year appointed tax collector. Basically, in so many words, it was going to be a major to-do to have the tax collector removed until the end of his term. So the council stuck it out with this individual until the end of his term and appointed somebody else. So we need to address that here. Might be a good idea to address assessor, tax collector, some of these others if we're doing this reorg as to how these people could be removed in the middle of their term. So I would ask that as we kind of build the language here, we kind of fix that. I think if we're sensitive to balance on the appointment, I could warm to the mayor appointing. There's a reason historically that the mayor hasn't appointed. One is that there's been this sort of huge wall that was built between the mayor and the finance positions on purpose. The view was that, or at least this is the way the framers of the government set it up 100 plus years ago, was that the mayor, for all practical purposes, runs the day-to-day operations. He appoints all the department heads, and he controls their salaries, who gets appointed, all their staff. He has huge say over the day-to-day operations. The view was that we're going to separate the finance positions so that there's someone keeping an eye on the mayor and the operators of the government, so that all of these people could not be completely in cahoots with each other in terms of the spending of the money, and there's this wall, if you will, to the extent that they even decided to have the treasurer be elected. A long time ago, that was viewed as a good idea. Thank you. So to not have that, we would have to be careful. And I think then what we need to do is consider, okay, if you look at it as a scale, and if you move treasurer from the city council side, because remember now, the position's elected, but if there's ever a vacancy, the charter says that the council appoints. So when the public voted in this charter, they gave the appointment power to the city council. So if we're going to remove that from our side of the weight and put it in the mayor's column, then I think the mayor needs to revisit some other things that could give balance back. For example, we've had things on the plate, and they're mentioned later in this agenda. The DPW commission, this council has passed at least 3 or 4 times to have the mayor's appointments to the DPW and fire commission confirmed by the city council. He gets those as of right, and there's no confirmation power. It's the only 2 commissions where that's the case. Should that be revisited? Like, okay, you give us treasurer, but we'll give you, he would still make the appointments, but should we have confirmation of power over the DPW and fire? I think that's something that would give, again, keeping equilibrium in the government is healthy. The other issue that we've talked about is the recall provision. The mayor has generally been opposed to the recall provision for 4-year appointments. I think we need to create a high bar, but we need to get, if we give him this, do we get something over here that allows the recall provision to go forward? Because you get a bad apple, the public has to have access to deal with. And 2 years, you can kind of wait it out. 4 years, that's a long time. And the other thing I think that would give balance is I don't think this should be a 5-year appointment. I think it would be best to be a 3-year appointment. That's what we give for the tax collector. That's what we give for the assessors. I think it would be in that spirit. So I think if we just be mindful of balance, mindful of how we handle removal, I think we can make it work, because I do agree with you. The time has come that we need to have someone very competent. I'm a big fan of residency. The other thing about going to appointment, unless you're going to add a residency requirement, the elected has de facto maintained a residency requirement. Yeah. So that's something for us to consider. Do we want to have a residency requirement? Maybe it's that you move to Holyoke within a year of appointment, maybe. Or do we not want to have residency at all? I think we need to think about that. We've actually even tried, for example, with the law department years ago when, 11 years ago when we did the rewrite of the law department, we said, well, how do we give them more autonomy of the mayor? Because one of the concerns with the law department is, their direct appointments of the mayor was that, we gave them just cause termination, right? That's a high legal standard. But we gave that to the law department employees because we wanted them to be as insulated from political firings as possible. Other than the top job is subject to confirmation and the mayor's appointment, but the other people, we did that intentionally. So we're always mindful of balance, always mindful of these kind of things. So just some things for the committee to think about as we, work our way through this.
Thank you. I think that the point you raised around the residency requirements is really interesting for whether or not the council will want to pursue that. I think it's interesting. I think also I like the idea of sort of looking at some of the other higher level appointments, like how are they structured currently? Mm-hmm. And do we want the same structure, or do we intentionally want to sort of start where we are here with making a shift that may be applied to other positions as we go through this restructuring? I also think the idea of how long the appointment is really interesting, including when does it occur? Because if it is a mayoral appointment, but for example, it's a 5-year position, you could have a mayor that, I guess if you had someone that left the position early, they'd be fulfilling that current cycle. I'm just not, in terms of it being named a mayoral appointment, I would almost want to see it calendared out for, 15, 20 years. When is the election versus when are they appointing someone? Because it may be that they're coming in and someone is it possible to have 3 years left? And so they really don't have any power.
Correct.
To change them at all until they hit year 4. So
we would need fixed terms of office, to your point. It would be not 3 years from when you start, or 5 years, whatever it is. It would be like they have it right now. So you could be getting 6 months left.
Right. So I think that's just an interesting question of what would we want the lineup to be? Would it be you serve at sort of at the leisure of the mayoral term, and when the term's up, your term is up because it's a mayoral appointment? Or is it something that has more stability? It's structured, in fact, to fall on off years,
Right.
so that there's more transition between potential mayoral appointments if someone is sort of ending their term and a new person is coming in. So I think that's an interesting question to pursue, because I think there's really pros and cons depending on which way you go. I do want to highlight that Councillor Bartley has joined us in chambers, and Councillor Vacan has joined us on Zoom. Welcome, Linda. Thank you. Because Linda has not joined us, I am going to read the language that allows us to operate as a hybrid meeting. So I'm just going to make a motion to take a... Actually, do I have to suspend the rules to make this motion?
No. Yeah. I don't know.
Maybe? Because we're in the middle of a motion, technically?
I think you're okay.
All right, so I'll make a motion to take a roll call vote that for the purposes of this meeting, which will be applicable to all motions, to remove an item from the table, place items on the table, package items, or suspend the rules unless there is an objection.
So moved.
And I'll second that. And let's do a roll call vote. Councilor McGrath-Smith, yes. Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti?
Yes.
Councilor Vacan?
Yes.
Thank you, and welcome. Okay, I had Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti's hand, and then I also see Councilor Devine.
Well,
Vacan, did you also have your hand up?
yeah, I was going to say,
Yes.
Counselor, you can go first. You had your hand up and you haven't spoken yet.
Thank you. And I'm sorry to be a little late on the
Not at all.
Zoom there. And thank you for letting me on, Tessa.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what I missed in the earlier discussion. I did hear what Councilor Jourdain was saying. But what I wanted to do was also make a motion to take up item 37 with item 2, because they're both about the treasurer. And they only differ relative to appointing authority. So I was hoping someone on the committee would second it so we could take them up together, which is
I'll second that.
usually what we do.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay. So I would just like to have them on the table together.
Is that, I second that. So the only difference
Yeah.
is,
The only difference between these two items is that 37 says ordered that the city of Holyoke, and then it has the exact same language, but then later on, it just says that in this case, the appointment will be made by the city council, right, instead of the mayor. The rest of it is the exact same.
yes.
Right, right. And so I was just hoping we can take them both up, and then at some point, when we make a recommendation out of committee, then they would both be dealt with. So we wouldn't have one just sitting in the jacket.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I do think the goal in terms of where as chair, I can just speak to the reason why I moved this one to go forward was 'cause I thought it made sense to start with one, with the understanding that anyone could easily make an amendment and just say, I would like to amend this in order to have it be this. But we can take up both if that's your preference. And that's fine, because when we move to, I think these are going to sit for a while. We still have more
Right.
information coming. So
Right.
I think both
So-
are going to stay. There's a reason why it's tabled instead of being given leave to withdraw today.
Right, right. So if we can just take them up when we move one, we will be resolving them both.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, thanks.
Did you want to speak to item 2?
Yes, so my main concern with item 2, because in general, I am warm to changing the appointment of the treasurer from elected. And I voiced this at our last city council meeting when I asked Attorney Bissonette to provide something for us in writing relative to our ability to vote it with a simple majority of the council. And it seems, and if I'm repeating something Councilor Jourdain already said, I apologize, but historically, it seems these things would need to go before the public because it is a major charter change to an elected position. And I understand there's been a recent opinion that there is a different way of approaching it, but we don't have anything formal from the state in front of us that really shows us how we could do that. And so I would be eager to see some validation from a state office relative to that method for changing.
Thank you. Yes, so just so you know, I'm hoping to have Councilor Murphy-Romility speak and Councilor Devine, and then we're going to ask Michael Bissonette to weigh in on that. That's the next step. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Councilor Jordan. I am definitely open to compromising on the term. 3 makes a lot of sense, especially with a mayoral term. I'm definitely open to, and fine with that. I took a note for other mayoral appointments, and this is just because I'm not sure, but do we have similar language for a mayoral appointment that is confirmed by the council that identifies what we should do in the event that someone can no longer fulfill their duties? That's through the chair to Councilor Jordan.
We have, I think the closest we have to that is we have an ordinance now because of, we created, I'm going to say around 2015, 2016, because of some of the dilemmas. We wanted to strike a balance, as I mentioned, this sort of wall between the finance jobs and the administrative assistant for that matter, where we're not here day to day. We created an ordinance that says the mayor day to day supervises these individuals. Even though there are appointees, we've, again, given to have the good operation of government, we gave him the day to day oversight and supervision of them. In the event, and hopefully this is answering your question, in the event he has a problem, or she has a problem with them, then he is to report this to the Public Service Committee here and bring them in for discipline or any of these issues. And then it would be ultimately the council that would fire in that case. These people, so that we could have accountability there, but we're running up. I wanted to make sure that it's better than we were when we had the tax collector situation, but it should be checked to see, does that really cover us when someone has a term of office and on removing them? But I think it might, because it does speak to removal. All of our appointments. But now this wouldn't be one of our appointments, so it really wouldn't fall under that ordinance. But that would be the situation where you had a bad collector, bad assessor, bad administrative assistant, like i.e. someone just goes MIA, doesn't show up for work for a month.
Could this be the case where the mayor, maybe there's a language or a compromise we struck on, the mayor could put forward the issue for it to be brought to council?
Right, we got to write a paragraph in here somewhere that just addresses the process.
No, thank you for that, because my suggestion was going to be, if we do have something, let's just take that language and add it into this, and if we don't, that's really helpful.
Because if we give them the appointment, we don't have that now, so we'd have to write something in this.
And then my last point was just about the residency requirement part. I appreciate the need for, or the desire, or the intent behind residency requirements. I also, as someone who has been looking for a house in Holyoke for almost 2 years now, this market is wild, and I think we do limit ourselves if we set too short of a time frame for someone to move here. Now, that's not to say hopefully the market improves and one of the many offers that I put in on a house will be accepted one day. We can only hope. But I think 2 years is great, or 3. I mean, as long as there's the intent to move here. I see this with Carl and DPW. He's been looking in Holyoke for a while, and it's just a tough market. So I wouldn't want us to limit that. I'd rather that we have a qualified individual who commits to living in the Pioneer Valley, commits to living in Chicopee, Springfield, Holyoke. I don't know, like, if there's compromise on that level, as long as we know they're local and they're not, in Boston. I don't know. But I would just ask for us to figure out a little bit of flexibility with that. And then, yeah, I think that's my only responses to that. So thank you.
I think too that there's a reason why we're looking at restructuring, and later in the meeting is looking at the idea of creating a CAFO, and the reality is that we're doing that because while we're a small city, we have complex issues, and I think one of the pieces around changing it from an elected to an appointed position is that the residency requirement potentially doesn't apply, and that we could be looking for the most whip-smart candidate we can find that's got really good ideas and knows how to move us forward. So I do think that I'm open to there potentially not being a residency requirement for a qualified candidate. Although, to the point we just heard, I think there's a difference between being local versus someone really living quite a ways away. They would need to be someone very connected to this community. How we define that, I'm not sure. But I know that my interest in this process of the financial restructuring is to get the best people that we can at the helm so that we can move forward and be able to take advantage of their professional skills, that hopefully, we can widen the pool to get something that we're not currently getting access to. Councilor Devine.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for taking my hand. It's been raised for quite some time. But I wanted to, just a couple of things, and maybe Attorney Bissonnette can answer one of them, is the word approval synonymous with confirmation.
Attorney Bissonnette, are you able to respond to that? The question is, it's saying approval. Is approval the same thing as confirmation?
Normally, we have
confirmation is a term used requiring an appointment to be confirmed by the legislative body. Example, governor's appointment of judges has to be approved and certified by the governor's council. In this case, the discussion seems to be about having the mayor appoint and the city council confirm, much as is done with the director of the Department of Public Works. So there is some precedent for that, and that may be the route. If you want to take that route, you're entitled to do so by ordinance.
Attorney Bissonnette, can you clarify the difference again between it saying here that this is with approval of city council? What would be different if the language instead said upon confirmation of council? Would it be the same effect or somehow different?
It would be the same effect.
Okay. And the same process?
Yeah, the terms are synonymous, really.
Okay.
We would probably recommend, and I suspect House Counsel, if we did home rule petition, would change that to confirm and be consistent with whatever other language is in the charter.
Okay.
Thank you. I do have a couple other questions. And I'm trying not to be critical, but we keep tabling things and tabling things and tabling things. The language that you have here, with the exception, the only exception that I see that I would like to change is that it be a 4-year term coinciding with the mayor's term. So if it's the mayoral appointment, it should be when it coincides with his or her term, in my opinion. The other thing is, you've got some good language here, and I think I understand where you're going. You want to make sure, well, do we want residents? Do we want this? Do we want that? I don't understand why we can't just go to the state, get this language in so we can have it done, and then work on the other things that you want to do, whether it's residents, whether it's whatever it may be. But I think right now, people seem to be going off in different directions, and I don't mean any offense to that, but you're never going to get this done if you don't just do it. So I'm sorry if I'm complaining too much, but I just think it's a lot simpler than you're making it.
I
Thank you.
appreciate the urgency, Counselor Devine. I do. I do.
Thank you.
Counselor Bartley, do you want to speak first, or do you want me to have Bissonnette clarify based on what she just said? Okay. Mike, do you want to just walk us through the timeline in terms of moving us through a home rule petition?
Happy. Home rule petition is basically a request for your state representative and state senator to co-sponsor a piece of legislation only directed at the Holyoke City Charter to provide for a very set of specific changes. This one would have, as I recall, 6 fairly specific charter changes relative to the treasurer's position in 6 different sections of the charter. Unless you wanted to work on updating other sections, I would suggest that it be limited to changing any reference to an elected treasurer to appointed treasurer. It won't be quite as lengthy as the one some of you may recall when the name of the city council was changed and a number of provisions had to be altered in the original charter. So the process is, by majority vote, the city council approves a home rule petition to be sent to the legislature. City council, upon approval of the mayor, then has that go to the clerk to be certified, off to the state rep to be filed as a piece of legislation, requires passage by both the House and the Senate once it's through the Joint Committee on Municipalities, and that should be a relatively smooth sailing for this particular piece of legislation, I would imagine. Hopefully we could see that accomplished before July 1st.
Okay.
I would also note one provision in here that's of interest is because the 2023 elections have come and gone. So we are now in the situation where we will not have an election before Rory's term. I'm sorry, we'll not have an election until 2 months before Rory's term will expire. As a result of that, because that position would be on the ballot, nomination papers would then go out, I believe in Holyoke, it's February. So we need to be mindful of that date in 2025, which is why I'd like to see this get done this summer, if possible.
So the goal is to move this to home rule, through a home rule petition, hopefully to be resolved this summer. However, you're saying so that by the following February is when the next nomination papers would go out for treasurer? And so we'll have already established that we're moving forward with this. But doesn't that still mean that we're going to have a ballot question asking if they want to be a treasurer right next to potentially someone running for treasurer?
Possible, entirely possible.
Okay.
Which is why I propose the alternative. And I want to apologize to Councilor Bacon. I did, apparently the memo that I prepared on this for the mayor back in the fall was tagged on to a special meeting of the council. I'm not sure which one it was, might have been the budget one. And that was added to that, but it was never distributed to the members. So I just found it, forwarded it. I thought we had provided it last week, but I wanted to get that out to everybody tonight or tomorrow before the Finance Committee meeting. It basically was my original thoughts on this, as well as the timeline to get us to January 2026, when Rory Casey's term as the elected treasurer would expire. In addition, it outlined some of the concepts of 43C, which is a statute that gives the council by ordinance the authority to go ahead, notwithstanding the charter, and create this optional form of municipal administration. And that was part of that was attached to the memo, so you get a chance to look at that as well.
Yes, and the memo actually we have underneath item 4. Honestly, we could have attached it to several items tonight. And so the memo is actually underneath item 4. It is the memo that's from October 24th, 2023. Because, yes, we could move this together, forward just as one change. But I think the process that Mr. Bissonnette has created is actually a process where we would allow to have multiple changes moving forward at once. That might be something that, with its complexity, perhaps doesn't work, or maybe it's one way to simplify and move things forward, right? Again, it's the will of the body in terms of how they're going to respond to that. And I think we can review the memo when we get to 4, or should we review it now? It is connected because the timeline is there. So I guess I'm just going to read the section that says that. Okay. With the ballot question deadline already passed for 2023, again, this is the memo from Attorney Bissonnette, my thought is to move 2 council orders forward. First, for the city to adopt the provisions of MGL Chapter 43C. Second is to approve the Finance Department option allowable under Section 14. This would allow the next council to begin creating a new Finance Department ordinance to take effect on the first day of the municipal year in January 2026, which is also the end of the elected treasurer's current term. During that same period, needed changes and updates to the charter could be drafted and submitted to the legislature under the home rule process. A 7-member charter review committee could be created to recommend a home rule petition to align the charter with the new structure and modernize the language or any outdated provisions. Maybe a solicitor with 3 mayoral, 3 council appointees. Possible timeline: adopt 43C and approve option under Section 14 for the Finance Department to be created. 2, Rory elected to complete term ending 1/26. 3, a new council begins drafting a finance ordinance, maybe forms a charter review committee. 4, drafts for a home rule petition and finance ordinance in June of 2024. References to finance officers to be revised to align with new ordinance provisions. 5, public hearings on changes in September of 24. 6, a home rule and ordinance is adopted. The goal here was December 2024. Clearly that part did not happen. And then home rule approval by state by June 2025. Mike, do you want to speak to the process that you've created here? Because I think, to Councilor Devine's point, the other possibility is, rather than a kind of creating a process where all of these pieces are happening at the same time, we could just tackle one at a time. And we could just move a home rule petition forward for the treasurer and then move to the next piece.
Could I make a friendly suggestion? It's almost a point of order.
Sure.
Item 4 speaks to the creation of a CAFO, which is going on in ordinance, and you're probably not going to do anything with that because you just got a copy of it. So that's not really going to go too far. Item 1 is speaking to a treasurer, okay? What you have in 43C is entirely different. Not even a little bit the same. Entirely different. This is to change how we handle a treasurer. This section of law speaks to the creation of a completely consolidated department, which I don't believe is on the agenda anywhere. And this is saying, by adopting this, you're merging the duties of community development, code enforcement, and municipal finance together in one, led by potentially a director of finance. That's not this.
No.
And this isn't on the agenda. And I'm just saying
the reason why it's on the agenda, just so we're clear, is that it did name a timeline for a process by which item 2 could be accomplished. And my reason why I asked Bissonnette, right, there's a way of doing this and following this process. There's also a very different process where we just take this piece and move it forward. So that's why I brought this up. One, because CAFO is later, but also because this does talk about a timeline where the creation of the treasurer position would be affected.
one of many jobs that would be affected.
Yes.
And I'm just saying, this would be, you could do a whole 2-year study on just the effect of 43C I mean, that is a massive change with all kinds of downstream implications that hasn't even been discussed at any public meeting that I'm aware of. I'm just saying, this is not like, oh, well, we could do this, that you actually have to send it to the public, or, oh yeah, we have this alternative method that I'm just saying it totally wildly changes a whole bunch of things besides treasurer. I'm just pointing that out. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Attorney Bissonnette?
Just to clarify, in that particular statute, Counselor, there are three separate options laid out for municipal government. One is to consolidate code enforcement by combining building and the health department into a code enforcement department. The second one speaks to combining community development and planning into a Department of Planning and Community Development, which I think Holyoke has done quite successfully. And the third one is the one we discuss here, which is combining the various financial offices under one department known as the Finance Department, with a head to whom the sub-departments would be responsible, and ultimately the head of that department would be responsible to the mayor. So there are three separate options. It doesn't, I don't want to scare anybody that this is a whole new city government umbrella, but thank you for pointing that out.
Councilor Bartley?
Well, great to be here. All right. Thank you to the chair and Attorney Bissonnette as always. I'll just try to give I heard most of the meeting, even though I wasn't here for the beginning part. I heard most of it on the computer, so I feel like I can just point out a few things just for your consideration. That's all. Let me ask first off: Did you take number 3 off the table yet? Because
No.
would that be? Because I would like to talk. Thank you, Jeff. I would like to talk about that in kind of context with this.
Sure.
So I don't want to.
Is it possible to suspend the rules to take them up as a package while we're in one?
You can.
All right. Well, I'll make a motion to suspend the rules so that we can take up item 3 alongside item 1, or item 2 rather.
2 and
3.
3. And, but what was the other one? Sorry. 4. Motion to take up motion to suspend the rules and take item 3 with item 2 and.
I don't know if you want to take up 4 as well.
No, I didn't, but Counselor Bacon.
So we need to vote on 37, please, because we had a
Thank
motion
you.
on it, but I don't
Thank
think
you.
we voted.
I was trying to figure out what item that was. 37. So item 2, 3, and 37 as a package.
Okay. Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
It's a
Aye.
roll call vote because we're on hybrid. All right. Yes?
Yeah.
McGrath Smith, yes.
Yes.
Murphy Ramboletti, yes. Bacon?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, Bartley.
Okay, so they're all before us. That's great. If you so I agree with I think just about everything that was said tonight, and I think all good points were made. So I'm just going to embellish on a couple of things. One instance that was just brought up. So I'm looking at item 2, and I'm looking at the language, and you'll notice that the language in item 2, as opposed to item 37, it's different than what is on the summary of the ballot question, right? So you've got a ballot question that says there's a little bit of loose language on there, and there's a difference between 5 years and 3 years, and it says, and the qualifications may be established by ordinance. Well, clearly it's going to be shall be established by ordinance. That's way too loose. And then if accepted, the treasurer elected in 23 to fill the remaining 2 years. Well, I got to be frank with you. That's not the deal that was proffered with Mr. Casey. So why we're putting this into a ballot question is beyond my comprehension. So Mr. Casey made it very clear that he would resign So I don't know why that's in a ballot question. So I would suggest that we really chew on that one as well. So, and Mr. Casey is certainly eligible to apply. Now, relative to the, it may seem like a minor thing, but it's, I think approval and confirmation, I think it's clearly, to me, you want to have the word, if just looking at number 2, if you were going to go with number 2, you would say confirmed, confirmation. You wouldn't say approval. You just use clearer language. So I think Mike picked up on that, and you heard the prior speaker mention that. I think that makes good sense. The other, one other small point, Mr. Casey was elected in 23 to a 4-year term.
2 years.
He's not in a 4-year term?
No, just he gets the remainder of the current.
He gets the remainder of 2 years. Okay. So with that being said, the only way we can get around having the thing on the same ballot, which would be a total disaster, in my opinion, you'd have to have a special election. You have to call a special municipal election to do this. That's all you can do. So I just don't think there's a way around that, frankly. So if truthfully, that would be a really sticky wicket, in my opinion. So if we're gonna try to do this is 24, boy, it would be amazing to get on the ballot for 24, to be truthful. I don't know why we couldn't do it, because there's ample time, to be honest. I mean, we already heard the clerk say, I think you have 35 days before the November election to get a ballot question together. So, I mean, really the goal needs to be to get it on the 24.
Before then.
Well, it needs to be on the 24 ballot. And that goes back to what the prior speaker said, and I completely agree. Look, you don't need to come up with every single nuance in the rule about who's appointing and who can terminate. And I mean, I think you just want to get it down to Boston. And we've had this happen before where they've taken it up and they bottled it. I mean, so sometimes it's just been the case where it just never came out of there. So, and they're busy and they don't feel like dealing with little Holyoke issues unless somebody's really riding herd on that. So, just something to chew on. I just want to make an additional point or two, and that goes back to the residency thing. So. Yeah, I'm a big supporter of residency, but if you can't put residency in there. I mean, that would have to be in the ordinance. And then, in my opinion, if we're going to talk about that, we'll talk about an ordinance committee ever so briefly. Residency is important, but in this day and age, maybe it's tough, but maybe you could put a financial incentive in there. So if the employee was resided in Holyoke, there'd be a financial incentive to do so. So that might be a compromise. The other compromise I thought of between 2 and 37 is I mean, I think by having the mayor appoint a CAFO, I think that sort of puts me in the position and thinking that the city council should appoint the treasurer collector. So I don't know, I don't believe that's been brought up tonight. That was always the thinking, that we're going to have the combined office. And right now we appoint the collector. So if we're going to do this, I really think that we should have a combined office, treasurer/collector, appointed by the city council. The carrot for the mayor is that he appoints the CAFO. I don't know why that, I don't believe that should be controversial. One other point that's rather important is that nothing goes down to Boston unless it's signed off by the mayor. So the mayor can just not sign it. It's not like it's a veto and we can override it. That doesn't work that way. If the mayor doesn't sign it, it does not go to Boston. And we've had experience with that in the past. That's, boo-hoo, that's how it works. But I just think that's an important point to recall. So again, we appoint the collector. The whole thinking on this, we're going to have a combined office, treasurer / they're basically a combined office now, with the floating clerks and the offices are side by each down there. And I think there's a lot of intra office kind of consideration. So hopefully that'll lean the majority of us to go with kind of a 37, but again, with the thinking we make a treasurer collector, and the thinking that the mayor appoints the CAFO. So there's a mayor's person, and that puts up, as Kevin said earlier, I'm not saying, Kevin said walls, and so we'll just use that as a metaphor, that's fine by me. It's just separation of powers. That's what it is, checks and balances, back to 5th grade civics. So that's really, it's not a power thing, it's just checks and balances between the legislative and the executive. And I just think that's important to chew on. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you.
I think I hit all of my points on that one. I just just the last point is I do agree with the prior speaker that we need, and to my final, I think I made the point earlier, but the final point is if we move this forward expeditiously, we can get it to Mrs. Duffy and to Mr. Velis, and they can really kind of put the pedal to the metal. And I don't want to wait till summer.
And they both said they will.
Yeah, I'm sure they will, and hopefully the chief, the head of the Senate and head of the House will take it up and move it along and get it back to us quick so we can put it on the 24 ballot. And I really think that needs to be the goal. That has to be urgently done.
Yeah, I love that push.
Hopefully that helps. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Councilor Devine?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Just for everybody's benefit, it is March 25th, 2024 at 7:05 p.m., and I completely agree with Councilor Bartley. He is absolutely right. I don't know if, and a lot of you may not know, again, how this works, but he's right in that if the mayor doesn't approve something that you do, nothing's going to happen down at the legislature. The other thing that we should find out is the legislature taking any kind of a recess this summer or shortly. I do think, and again, with all due respect, that you're working on too many things all at once. Why don't you just work on item 2, get that done, have the mayor sign off on it, and send it to the legislature, and let that be approved, and then everything else from there on, you can take care of different questions that you might have. And also on item 4, it's a copy. The original was sent to ordinance. So I hate to see you wasting your time on an item that was a copy rather than the original going to ordinance. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to recognize that Councilor Givner has joined us on Zoom as well. So, can I do one thing? And then
Yes,
we can-
yeah.
Okay, because I want to move us, if we can, beyond this. We have other items on the agenda tonight. So, one thing that I'm hearing is that it makes sense for us to potentially remove the language from if adopted to vacated.
If adopted to vacated.
And so and it also removes the issue there with the date that no longer, applies. Also hearing that we need to change the word may to shall.
Right.
I'm also hearing, like, some people are like, let's look at 3 years. Some people are saying, let's look at 4 years. I don't hear anyone interested in 5. And that's what's here. The ballot language itself says 2. So I guess one question for me is, if it's possible to move this forward back to council, what would that recommendation look like? I think I'm hearing it makes sense to amend to remove if adopted through vacated, to change may to shall. I'm not sure what it makes sense in terms of years, but I think the council is ready to talk about it and see if they can move it forward.
If I may?
Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I did want 5 years, but in the spirit of compromise, I'm open to 3. So that's why I said 3. And I think for a term, and yes, the other thing I was going to mention, if we're getting to that point, is obviously I filed this order over a year ago. So initially my intent was like we'd get it on the last ballot. So obviously that section after if adopted does not make sense, and it does make sense if it's vacated. The Only other thing is just, yeah, I mean, I agree with what folks have said about all the other things that are being discussed. I think it's great that we brought them all up together because they all do relate. I did not file item 2 with the intent of changing all of the things. I believe that this is our first step into having, whether it's an appointed tax collector / treasurer, I think we just need to figure that out, but I am willing to make an amendment to the order to change 5 to 3 years.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Counselor. And also shall be established by ordinance. And I'm also willing to make an amendment to remove the section of, if adopted, the treasurer elected in 2023 municipal election will fill the vacancy in the office for the remaining 2 years. So those are my motions under.
Counselor Bacon, would you second those amendments?
I would second those amendments. The only other question I have, are we leaving the appointing authority out of the language at this time? Are we taking that out as well so that we're not having that debate? Or are we also going to talk about the appointing authority? As I've heard discussion, city council's been appointing relative to collector and treasurer, mayor, if CAFO moves forward, would be appointing. Are we going to address that in this
I mean,
order?
one piece is, to the point of taking one piece at a time, I don't know what happens with CAFO, right? Like I know there's a will of the body to move this forward. And I do think it makes sense for it to be a mayoral appointment with city council approval. I think that is a good
Confirmation?
Yes.
Okay.
So I would love to leave that language in there as we vote on it tonight.
But I will say. if
Yep,
I may,
sorry.
Sorry, and Councilor Jordan has his hand up. I'm okay, if you guys mentioned changing approval to confirmation, obviously I'm okay with that.
Okay.
That's all.
I like that. Yes.
Couple of points. All good. I would say, just on that last section, you're going to have to say when the appointment starts, because this is Rory's job until January of 2026. He's now been elected to that job. He cannot be removed earlier than that, in my opinion. He's entitled to that position until January of 2026. So this position, that last sentence needs to be reworded in a way that it begins, January of 2026. And then to answer the question that came up earlier, which is every 3 years from there. So January 2026, January 2029, January 3032. That's when the appointment is made, every 3 years, not, because otherwise if you don't address that, people will say, well, what do you mean 3 years? Oh, is it 3 years from when they start? Or is it, no, you get what's remaining on that, then you get your own new appointment. That's how we do it for everybody else, like tax collector, assessor, everybody else. So I think we need to clarify that it is a term that begins January 2026 and thereafter every 3 years. So I would encourage the law department to draft it in that way. The other piece I wanted to make is I think you should say something, if we want to punt the football at the moment with the spirit of what people are saying to speed it along. You could say something like, the appointment and removal shall be set by the city council by ordinance. And then now it's up to us in the interim to go set the appointment and removal by ordinance at some later date. That we could do that, and you keep it vanilla in the charter, but then we set it by ordinance. Some point between now and whenever between now and January of 2026. Because that's when the job starts. So Otherwise, I think you have to put it in here now. You have to answer the question of who appoints and how removed. And you're either putting it here in the charter or you're setting it by ordinance. There is some advantages to doing it by ordinance. Some might argue there's some disadvantages too. Obviously, it's easier to create and uncreate if it's in an ordinance versus charter. But sometimes that's good because you give the government flexibility, right? Just like we have, like what we're doing right now. It's a major rigmarole kind of to change the charter. But in a future government might say, well, change the ordinance. We're going to move it to something else. But the term would be fixed and the appointment would be fixed. You could do that. And you could change the removal, because we're going to have to draft up something if we don't put it all in this. We either solve it now or solve it later.
That struck me as an ordinance process.
Yeah.
Than a charter process.
So you just need to put in a sentence here that says you're addressing it by saying the appointment and removal shall be set by the city council by ordinance.
Highly doubt the mayor is going to sign on that when they don't know what we mean by that.
Question? Sorry. You go ahead.
So it's either that or you'd have to put it in here now. I don't see there's two options.
I'm hearing that we would need to add language. If adopted, the treasurer will be appointed to a term beginning January 2026 on a fixed 3-year term or something similar.
Yep, that sounds good.
If we do not name removal in here, then it would be the mayoral's, it would be a mayoral power.
It doesn't say that one way or the other, right? You'd have to put in mayor if you mean mayor. Otherwise, if you just say, if you leave it silent, we don't know who appoints the treasurer.
Well, my assumption is that you can't, enumerate everything in here. And the reason why you would say qualifications for the position may be established by ordinance,
Yeah.
I assume that would include a myriad of possibilities for us to then enumerate there.
Correct. And
Why would we have to name removal as a specific thing that we would have the ability to enumerate?
Because then you run into the conundrum we've ran into in the past, which is these appointments. There's been legal opinions that have essentially said when you appoint someone to a term of office, you own them unless there is just cause to have them removed. It's a very high standard.
Okay.
The charter speaks to that. You're going to have to, again, the charter currently is silent on treasurer because it's all, the form of removal is you're voted out unless you resign.
Okay. Let's hear from Attorney Bissonnette and then Councilor Bacon.
Just quickly, this is only for the treasurer. So it has nothing to do with CAFO. It has nothing to do with how you want to create the finance department. This is just one piece of that puzzle. And I concur it's an important piece, but we need to be reminded, once this goes off to Boston, hopefully gets approved, you've got a whole creation of a department with a CAFO and how that gets appointed, how that gets removed. So all of that's going to follow right through. So I want to make sure we're kind of on the same page on this. This only applies to the treasurer, not anything else. Later, you'll be able to combine treasurer and collector because you don't already have an elected collector, you already have an appointed one. My guess is that when we get down to tax, that treasurer collector will follow the same path as your collector currently does with your vote, your appointment. So we'll see how that plays out. Just wanted to call it to your attention. Thank you.
So Mike, said another way, you're kind of encouraging that we just do appointment, the 3 years, and then set by ordinance at a later date, right? Once we figure that all out together?
Yep, you're already going to set the qualifications for treasurer by ordinance under this language. So you can include anything else that you would want to set by ordinance, including term of office or anything else. We know how hard it is to amend the charter as we begin to try to do this. Right. So if you want to restore or keep flexibility With this finance department, as you kind of shake it out, that may be the best way to do it.
Okay.
Does that mean that you are suggesting, Mike, that we actually remove the language that says for a term not to exceed 3 years in order to provide flexibility for it to be decided in ordinance?
You can do that, because you may want to have the treasurer serve a different term. But I think someone said the collector serves a 3-year term, so it may just be consistent with that. All I'm suggesting is you don't need to bind yourself to it by the charter.
Because we would do the home rule petition to change the charter as ordinance is going through the process to draft the ordinance. Then it would go to the ballot. The ordinance would already exist. So the ballot language could be created based on the ordinance.
No, the ballot language would be as bare bones as possible for
To the home
public.
rule petition?
Yeah.
Well, then
Yeah,
I
be
think
very-
that it may make sense to name the years. This is why I'm asking, because then it might make sense to name the years here, because on the ballot, people will want to know that detail. They will.
Oh, definitely.
So then I don't think it makes sense to remove.
Collector and assessor are in the charter now too, their terms.
I don't think
Right.
it makes sense then not to name 3 years here
I agree.
because of that.
Okay.
Okay. So
And this
have
would
an-
be effective in January 2026 is the language
Right.
to be added. Okay.
so just say effective January 2026. Okay. All right. Counselor Bacon?
So to clarify, so we're leaving in the term at 3,
Yep.
if our amendment is asked to recommend out. But I'm hearing that if we're creating the qualifications under ordinance and the termination, then it seems that the appointment should be under ordinance also.
That's right.
So I would ask, I will second.
Is that through
the-
me to to Attorney Bissonnette?
No, so what I'm trying to say is I'll second the amendments that Counselor Murphy Ramboletti proposed, and I would add the amendment that we take out the appointing language. And I would also add an amendment that we say the qualifications shall be created by ordinance, not maybe, should be shall.
Shall was in the original amendment, just so you know. Okay, so you're
For the
making,
creation of the ordinance, okay.
so you're asking if we will amend it to remove the appointing language?
Yes, because that would need to be addressed through the ordinance process.
I mean, I think we would need to vote on that separately.
Well, that's my motion. Yeah.
Okay, well, so the motion on the table is
I'll second it for the purposes of discussion.
okay. Any discussion?
Councilor Bartley set his hand up.
Okay, Counselor Bartley?
Yeah, I think this is a good meeting. It's great discussion. So I just want to go back to what Mike said, and I agree with everything Mike said. And it's so first off, and I just want to put in my own words. So and if Mike can, he can correct me if I say something wrong. But one is Mike's. We're not talking about the CAFO, but you can't take this up without that being in the back of your mind. The CAFO is important. So if I was to wave a wand, it would be the mayor appointing the CAFO. The CAFO would be overarching, and underneath the CAFO, so it'd be the mayor, CAFO, and then you'd have your treasurer collector, your assessor, your auditor would be underneath the CAFO. And that right there, Madam Chair, I heard what you said, that you want the mayor to, but you know, if you look at it in an orderly fashion, then you wouldn't have the mayor appoint somebody underneath his appointee like that. You'd want to have a check and balance. That's how government works best. I think that's been proven. But and I think I heard that's what Mike said. And back to what my brand new friend just said earlier is that what we want to do is not kill ourselves here, because this is what we're doing. We're going to kill ourselves with this, and we're not going to get it out to Boston in a timely fashion so we can have it on the November 24 ballot. And by the way, who knows what that election's going to be. I mean, it could be anything, right? But this is what we seem to want nowadays. We want to have these things decided at the big presidential races. So, I mean, we're going to get the turnout that we not going to be any better in the subsequent years, right? Until 28. So I think that we should really just sort of get this off with as broad of a language as you can without specifying anything. I'm just going to throw one more monkey wrench in there, and I'm sorry to do this, but I heard what Tessa said about the 5 years. I heard and obviously I see what the 3 years is. Right now the term is 4 years. So I don't know why we wouldn't just say, listen, I'll vote it any way you want, but not to exceed 4 years, because to me, that would be like the carrot for the vote. Okay, we've always had 4-year elections for the city treasurer. To me, that's where the compromise is at 4, frankly. But you guys take the vote, and whatever you vote on, I'm going to agree on. But I'll never make another amendment on that. But that's just for you to chew on is all I would. And I'm sorry to throw a monkey wrench in there, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say it. So. That's it for me.
Councilor Murphy-Rambelotti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's not the worst monkey wrench you've thrown into the mix. Makes sense.
I'm sorry I got one.
No, it's okay. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
I'm in the spirit of compromise and moving things forward. I guess I'm okay with not including who appoints it. But what I worry about is that we'll have the same sort of voter response that we did 10 years ago when everything with the charter change was in like one ballot, and it's like, if you don't agree with it, you're not going to vote for it. So I worry that if people don't know who's appointing it, they're also going to say, I'm just not voting. So that's kind of, if it's city council, if it's mayor, okay. I guess that is my main concern. And I really don't want to delay the conversation more. I don't want to kick this can down the road. To be fair, this has only come up on the agenda 1, 2, 3 times, and it's kind of a big question. So as much as it seems like we haven't been moving forward, this is just our 4th time talking about it, and I'm glad that we are. But I am great with 4 years. I'm okay with saying that it would take effect in 2026. I'm okay with changing may to shall. I literally copied and pasted this from the last ballot question that we had, except for who appointed the council. But I'm okay with all of that stuff, and whatever the will of the body wants, I obviously, but I think some voters may feel like they want that choice, and I just worry that they're going to say, well, I'm not going to vote for it in general. So
I would like to move this to full council with us saying who we think the appointed body should be, because I think when we get to council, then there's something to argue. I think if we leave it blank, we're going to walk into that conversation, and the conversation could just go in circles around what we each personally want versus just driving to a conversation. And if the goal is we think it should be mayor, and we have a debate, and then it gets voted down, great. Then you know what your other option is. I'm worried about just like going in circles. I want to move forward. I'm open to hearing the arguments, but I think we should move to council to have a full conversation around this with some clear language.
Madam
All right, I
Chair?
see Vacan and I see Devine and Jourdain.
So 2 things. I just wanted to clarify, what is the current term of office for our collector in the charter? Is it 3 or 4?
3.
Okay, so if we say 3, we're being consistent with the collector.
Okay.
So I think that is a good amendment, particularly if we're looking forward to consolidating those positions potentially. So that amendment makes sense to me. And I'm comfortable seconding all those amendments. I hope we will move it out without the appointing authority. I hear that the chair wishes to keep it in, and I would make the amendment that the city council be the appointing body if committee wants to move it to council with an appointing authority. My concern is that if we put this into the mayor's appointment and then we put the next thing into the mayor's appointment, we're going to be risking losing the checks and balances that we currently have in the chart. And I think it's important to preserve those. Thank you. So that would be, if my first motion would be to take out the appointing authority and leave it in ordinance. If that can't get a second, my next motion would be to move that the appointing authority be the city council. Thank you.
Counselor Devine?
Yes, a couple of things, and perhaps Attorney Bissonnette might agree with this. If you don't have the mayor's backing as the approving authority, it won't get anywhere in the legislature. I will tell you that. You need the mayor's backing as the appointing authority. If you have the city council be the appointing authority, I believe that's where the politics comes in. So, in my opinion, you need the mayor's vote on that, or it's not going to go anywhere in the legislature. I also checked with Juan to see if the legislature was going to be in recess at all. Right now, they are working on budgets. And if anybody knows the legislature, that takes a long time. So you've got the legislature working on budget now, which is tough. So all I'm saying to you is, you got to keep the mayor as the appointing authority, or it's not going to go anywhere when it gets down to Boston. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Jordan?
So the 3 years to me is a definite. Again, because of the fact that I'm concerned, there's a lot here. It's on trust that we're going to get somebody good. A 5-year term was out of the question. 4 years makes no sense to me on the basis that I don't want to actually, it's just the opposite. I don't want it to be conterminous with the mayor, because this person is supposed to be a long-term person versus the elected person. And I don't want the mayor to just come in and start sweeping people out of here because I want to put my hand-pointed person. This way, if a person is on a 3-year term, they're probably going to have like 2 years with the current mayor before the mayor can really knock them out of office. And I think that's a good thing. So it takes sort of the politics, and then somebody can actually form an opinion to say, this person's doing a really good job, or, okay, no, I think this person's doing a lousy job, but I've at least had 2 years, as opposed to every time there's a new mayor come in, you're going to be switching this position. I don't think we're looking to do that. So I think that definitely speaks to the 3-year term. I personally am strongly in favor of merging the tax collector and the treasurer position. My view would be one would become the position and then the other would be the deputy. We both have good quality people in those roles, but I was seeing a sort of and this is also going to create a bench system sort of you've got a backup when there's a vacancy in one of these two positions, and combining those departments I think would be helpful. So I think the 3-year term helps us in that. As far as the appointment, I think the reason why I think people make good arguments on both sides of this. The problem is I think we need to figure out the whole matrix of it wouldn't surprise me if the mayor ultimately says, I want the CAFO to appoint the position. I mean, that could be one of it, right? It may not even be the mayor directly. It could be the CAFO appoints the treasurer. We'll see where this all goes. It could be city council appointing a joint treasurer tax collector, and we create the CAFO. We don't even have CAFO yet. So that has to be ironed out. Like, there's so many pieces that are missing. And I do agree with the speakers earlier about the urgency to adopt this, because I agree we should get this on the 24 ballot.
Yeah.
So it makes life easier for those who may consider running or not running in 2025, because all that uncertainty will be taken out. And hopefully, if this council can figure out what it wants to do on these other things, the voters will then have the answer by November, right? Like, we will have hopefully by November made up our decision on these ordinances, right? Like what we're doing. So by the time you go to vote, some of these uncertainties, because you make an excellent point, will be removed, and then you know what you're voting on when you go to end. Like, it's been decided, okay, this is going to be mayor, or they created the CAFO, but then they merged this, and like, we figured this stuff out between now and then. So that's kind of why I think we'd be better off leaving it neutral and say set by ordinance for now, and it allows us to figure all these things out, how all the pieces tie together. What we did is, we just got the elected piece out, we got it on the ballot, and we've solved the immediate need. And then we figure it out. I don't want to contradict the point that was made earlier, which is, I don't think you need to have the appointment in here as to who appoints at this point. All they're looking for is to see that the council supported this and the mayor signed off. It is true, if the mayor doesn't sign this, then this isn't going anywhere. Forget that the legislature won't support it. It never leaves the building. Okay. So he's going to have to sign whatever we approve. If he does, then I think they're fine with it, because then they're pretty agnostic on it, unless it's something illegal that House Counsel says is crazy. But basically they're like, okay, this is a local, applies just to Holyoke. They both approved it. We're good. So, yeah, I think we leave it neutral, say everything will be set by ordinance, and I think we should spell out the 3-year term in here, only because the other positions are spelled out by charter. So that's kind of my advice. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bacon.
Thank you. I would just like to renew my motion that was not seconded, because I kind of put two things together and maybe made some confusion. So I would just like to make the motion to take out the appointing language and leave it to the ordinance creation. And hopefully that makes it palatable to our mayor and accomplishes the major goal of getting the position appointed rather than elected. So I'm hoping I might get a second, but.
I'll second for the purposes of discussion. I do have a question, Madam Chair. So let's say that we do take out the appointing authority language, and then we send it to the mayor. And let's say that the mayor says, nope, I'm not going to approve this. I'm not going to send this. I want it to say mayoral or that's it. Do we have to start all over again? Maybe this is a question for Attorney Bissonnette. Do we have to start from the very beginning to get this filed and get this on the ballot with the correct language, send it back to committee, all that stuff?
Well, it never leaves Holyoke if the mayor doesn't approve it. It can't be submitted unless both the legislative body and the executive sign off on it. So in that case, it would fail sort of like a pocket veto. And then the council could have a new order filed, if only to add the language about appointment and try to pass it again. And again, it's a majority vote.
And so just to clarify, we would file another order. It would get sent back to this committee. We would have another meeting about it, and then we'd have to send it back to city council.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Givener, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question in regards to this why haven't we considered trying to make this a professional position instead of an appointment or elected? Because it seems like it's really important work that could use someone who's an expert in their field. So it's just my question to the chair or to anyone who has an answer.
I don't have a specific answer to that.
If I may, I would hope that the mayor appoints someone qualified. I mean, I don't know. It seems Councilor Bissonnette took himself off mute, so I'll let the attorney.
Well, the qualifications for this position would be created as part of that ordinance.
Right.
And it would define the whatever professional qualifications the council thought were appropriate for the position. Particularly if you're combining collector treasurer, you might want to have a different look. But all of that would be hashed out in the ordinance committee.
Thanks. Thank you.
I'd love to close discussion at this point and to move it forward for us to vote on making a recommendation to council based on the amendments that we have named, which is changing 5 to 3 years, removing the language from if adopted to vacated, changing may to shall, and adding the language effective 2026.
And we have the motion relative to taking out the appointing language that's on the table now.
Okay, well, let's vote on that first. An amendment, a motion was made to amend those recommendations by removing the appointing language. There was a second for purpose of discussion. On the motion, let's take a vote at this point. McGrath Smith, no. Murphy Ramboletti,
No.
Vacan.
Yes.
Okay. Amendment fails. So going back to the original motion with the amendments as stated prior, let's move to, on the motion, let's move to vote it to council with our recommendation.
Before we do, can I make one final suggestion?
How fast?
Very quick.
All right, go ahead.
I just think the problem now is, unless we're going to get into what are the other things that are going to provide balance, the council is giving away the appointment authority without a counterbalancing something, right? I haven't heard an answer. So if that's the direction 2-1 wants to go, and it's either not say council, not say mayor, but not do neutral, but go this way, then what's the counterbalance to the points that were raised earlier, which is, okay, so we're giving him the appointment to the treasurer now. What's he giving to balance the scale in the government? That's the concern. That hasn't entered into the discussion. So that becomes, to me, to leave that out there as a question mark.
Sure. And I think
is a problem.
You're not wrong that there is a question mark there, but I think it's in trying to take a piece and move it forward, knowing that there are other pieces that are complicating this picture that we don't fully understand yet. Yes.
We understand. We all have 13 perspectives. We understand them. It's just we haven't come to consensus on what those are. The problem is, I don't want to vote, even though I agree with 99% of this, and I'm strongly in favor of that. It's very hard for me to vote yes, because now I'm saying I'm agreeing to give the mayor this appointment without another countervening balance. Well, we're going to talk about the other balance down the road, and maybe we figure it out. That's the beauty of having this done by ordinance later, is the council will be presented with some sort of consensus where the mayor comes in and says, okay, we do this, this, and this, you give me the CAFO, and we're going to do this. Like, we're doing it as a complete package of all these issues, whereas if we just say, okay, you get this, maybe something happens down the road, maybe it doesn't. We don't know that there's any balance. So I'm just saying that's the downside to where we're going with this. So just by picking now without this. Okay, I think I made my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Murphy Ramboletti?
Thank you. So, I mean, I guess what I would say, partially the reason why I'm personally not bringing a lot of that up is just literally because it's not on the agenda. That does not mean I'm not open to it, and that does not mean that I don't think we should have these conversations with the mayor. I also, you know, I recognize the importance of getting this before the council for us to vote on, but I also recognize, and I've said this multiple times, like, if we're compromising, then no one's going to walk away happy. And I'm willing to not have something go out of committee tonight, and I'm just throwing this out there. I don't think we're going to slow down government completely if we wait a month, if that means that you may have the opportunity to talk to the mayor between now and then, if that would lead to a favorable vote. And I do think that the mayor could be open. I'm not going to speak for him, obviously, but if that's the case and that's what absolutely needs to happen, I recognize that. I also recognize that, you know, I did file this order because, I mean, I could have put nothing about approval. So clearly I personally feel a certain way, but I understand that there's other things to take into account. So I guess, you know, I know that it's not fun to compromise, but it's also not fun to get nothing that we want. And so I would hope that, if we do delay this another month, I would hope you have a meeting scheduled in April already, if I saw that on my calendar correctly.
Yep, Monday, April 29th.
I mean, I guess I would propose that maybe do you feel like a month gives everyone time to, this is a big decision, and I don't want to rush anything. And I've seen other decisions go before the council and we rush them forward because we want to get things done, and I get it. But at the same time, I don't want to take out the language because I really don't think the mayor's going to approve that. And like Councilor Devine said, what's the point if we're not, if this isn't going to go through the mayor's office, if this isn't even going to get to Boston, and then we have to start all over again? That's why I asked that question of Attorney Bissonnette, because that's still like another 3 or 4 months, probably, realistically, if we think about when things happen. So I guess I'm trying to find the middle ground here, because I recognize.
How about this as a suggestion?
Chair
Thank you.
McGrath?
Oh,
Could I point out that if we pass this with neutral, doesn't say council or mayor, just by ordinance, if he does oppose it, it's gonna, I mean, we could have it on April meeting, and then we'd have him come in and say, okay, if we give you this, what's your plan to keep balance? Like, you know, I'm willing to call him and say, well, what's the package? Like, where are we going with this? And then let's pass, like, there's other stuff on the agenda that I mentioned, you know, I picked that out as a, for example, will you now support that the council gets the DPW and the fire commission confirmation? Maybe that's the compromise. I don't know. You know, there's different things that we could do to provide that, but it's really hard when it's like, okay, this, but then there's no this. And it's like, that's the thing I'm concerned about. You know?
I feel like this is ready to go to a full council conversation where people can say their piece and we can get a sense of the room. Anyone can make an amendment in a full council meeting and shift the recommendation as it's going to council. If the only people who have weighed in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so less than half of council has weighed in. I want to hear what the rest of council thinks. I want to move it forward.
Right.
I don't want to move forward with neutral language because I think we will swim and people just making arguments back and forth. And I'd rather move it
I guess I can ask him. I can always call
forward,
the mayor and see if
but
he supports the neutral language.
I also think that
To
he
live
should
with
come
that.
to the council meeting.
Yeah. Okay. All right, well,
Chair McGrath, I would just like to make 2 points.
Yes, please.
So one, I would just like to note that we already have a strong mayoral form of government in our charter. And so what I'm advocating for by keeping the language neutral is the ability, as we're moving forward with the structural changes, to maintain the balance. And unless you folks know the mayor is opposed to this, I think we're making a lot of assumptions that he would be opposed to it, because he certainly hasn't been shy about coming in and weighing in ordinance meetings and finance meetings and any other meeting in which he has a strong view on a matter. So I don't think we should assume necessarily that he would pocket veto this, because it's not like we're not going to address the appointing authority. We're just doing it under ordinance. So I just think we're making a mistake to assume we know he would pocket veto this if we leave it neutral. So I just, ask the committee to consider that, and he will tell us if he does, and nothing will be delayed any longer than if we were to table it tonight. So if we keep it neutral and move it out neutrally, we'll know the same answer that we know if we table it for a month in the same time frame. So I really wish, the committee would reconsider my motion to take that out and leave it neutral regarding the appointing, and leave it under the ordinance. I'll renew my motion one time.
And a second?
Okay.
No, okay.
I did second.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
No, that's all right.
Okay. So moving forward, so you've seconded the motion.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to approve all the amendments plus also remove the
No,
appointing language?
we vote to approve or not,
Okay.
and it still goes to full council. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Is this on the full motion is my point, plus that amendment to all the changes? Or are we
Yes.
just voting on that amendment?
So
Make-
the motion on the table is that we will change 5 years to 3. And the qualifications for the position shall be established by ordinance. And we would just take out that if adopted, we would just take out the treasurer elected in the 2023.
With approval becomes by confirmation. I heard that.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Also adding effective 2026.
Yep.
But you also seconded, you want to remove the appointment will be made by the mayor?
I seconded that amendment I seconded the amendment
Okay.
to remove it from there. So then we vote on,
Okay.
and it can still go to full council, even,
Right.
no matter what. It can go to full council.
So it'll just say, instead of will be made by the mayor with approval of city council, it will be established by ordinance.
And it can go to full
Right.
council, and the full council can vote on it.
Right, they can do whatever they want.
Okay. All right. So you want it to
Roll
go to,
So do a roll call vote.
all right, roll call vote. Murphy-Ronbelletti,
No.
Bacon,
Yes.
McGrath-Smith, no.
It's okay.
Okay.
Keep going.
All right. So that recommendation goes to council with a 2 no, 1 yes.
Motion to take item,
So item 3, just want to name, so item 3 was just the home rule petition for the appointed treasurer. And of course, we've discussed changes to that. And so I'm wondering at this point if it makes sense just to table and wait for new legal language based on, what comes out of the city council meeting on item 2.
sure,
Or we could call it complied with, that we received it, because it won't be the same going forward, right?
Yeah, it's a question of does it make sense to table it just so that the new language can be added to this? Or does it have to
They will
become an
give us-
entirely different
I-
filed motion?
I think they'll give us new language, but whatever you guys want to do.
Because otherwise it's almost like we're giving it leave to withdraw, waiting for new language.
So I'll make a motion to table item 3.
Okay.
There's
And to send to legal for new language based on,
make a motion to table item 3 and send to legal for new language based on the city council's vote on the
To
petition.
be determined.
do I have a second? Okay, I'll second that. Any discussion? Okay, roll call vote.
Table,
Counselor Bacon?
yes?
Murphy Ramboletti?
Yes.
McGrath Smith, yes. Okay, item 4, I'd love to, it was copied to us from ordinance for the potential home rule petition from McGee. This is April 18th, 2023. Ordered that the position of the chief administrative and financial officer be created and added to Schedule A. This was initially taken up July 17th, 2023, but it's only copied to us. We can't act on it. I'd love to hear a motion that it has been complied with.
Motion that item 4 has been complied with.
Do I have a second? Okay, I'll second it. Any discussion?
No.
Okay, roll call vote. Counselor Bacon?
Yes.
Murphy Ramboletti?
Yes.
McGrath Smith? Yes. Okay, item 5. This came up in our last meeting on February 5th, 2024. This was initially filed January 22, 2024, from Devine, J. Rivera, and Givner. Ordered Rule 6 Decorum, Section E, add the words "or city employees" after the words "another member." The discussion was that we were in favor, but also wanted to look at other language as well. I think that at this point, I'd love us to just stay on the motion. Any discussion?
Just one comment.
Just Bacon from the committee first,
I
if you don't mind.
apologize. Yep, go ahead.
Counselor Bacon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll make the same comment I made at the last meeting, because the decorum refers to citizens of the community. And I think the decorum rule should apply to all citizens. And as I said before, we shouldn't be breaking people up into categories or tiers, because our citizens that come to the microphone, whether they're an employee of the city or not, and employees, when they come to the microphone, being employees, all deserve the same respect and the same level of decorum. So I oppose this as being redundant. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Devine?
Thank you. I do hope you adopt this tonight. Before I became a city councilor again, I can remember how Attorney Matuleski was interrogated when she was trying to give an opinion on something. Then I can remember, and with all due respect to the counselors that are there right now, that another counselor is always playing the victim, that the city solicitor should be thrown into the Connecticut River, that I was a lowlife. I cannot tell you and stress enough to tell you how many people in this city that work for this city hate to come before the city council because of the way they're treated. And that's why we put this language in there. It is not the same as the people that come to the microphone. These are city employees, and they deserve the respect that they should be getting, and they don't always get it. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Jordan?
A couple things. First of all is we keep the tapes of these meetings back before we had video. We also
are
have the
physical
old
tapes
audio
back
tapes.
there, yes.
Yeah. People should go back and look in the 90s at different comments people made about quote unquote city employees back then. And what people had said then, the newest champions of quote unquote city employees have made a lot of interesting statements in the past about city employees. So, and have been hypercritical of a number of people that they liked or disliked. So, it's kind of, for those of us that have a historical perspective, these newfound commitments to civility are kind of interesting. And I will say it also extends to, as we have in another rule here, what people say about other people on social media, the newest forum. It's one thing about what goes on in the room here. People should be civil towards each other. And, there's always people from time to time fall short of the standard, right? We all need to be committed to do it. And people get caught into the passions of the moments, and we have some good times. But, you're sitting at home and you're sitting on social media, bad-mouthing your colleagues, bad-mouthing different people in the public is bashing us. Just read those things. Mm-hmm. And then yet you hear these people who are now talking about, oh my goodness, decorum, and you're watching the statements these people make on social media, and it's like, good grief. Take
Are
a
you
good
almost
look.
done, Counselor? Just trying to move the meeting a little bit along.
Well, this all needs to be said because, I will say I don't per se have a problem with this. I will say, as I mentioned before, my concerns are things that are labeled as legitimate speech and commentary are all fair game as far as I'm concerned. Because unlike some others who maybe think everybody's doing a great job and everybody that works here is doing a wonderful job, newsflash, there are people that aren't doing. There are some people, it's a minority, but there are some people who are not doing a good job. And when people, there's a lot of different ways you can be a city councilor. Some people don't like confrontation. Some people are apathetic. Some people are really into what's going on. Some people really have point out and aren't afraid to point out problems that are criticisms. Constructive, legitimate criticism, I hope, as we go forward on these rules, and these will be hopefully enforced long after I'm gone, will be not to silence people and to create an atmosphere of censorship against legitimate criticism. Because our job inherently is to be the voice of the public. And as the voice of the public, our job is to speak vicariously for the public when they see things that are incorrect. And if sometimes, I don't know how many times I've had where I'm here pointing out things and years later, people will say, oh, wow, I didn't realize, boy, you were right about that. Where things were going wrong, where people were defending to the end, even when there were IG reports against different department heads. We're defending those people as this is all politics, or this is all personal politics of personal destruction, and all of these type of statements that were made, okay? When these were legitimate criticisms of certain departments. And this is the role of this council, not to be a bunch of backslappers that go out drinking with the city employees afterwards and we're all chummy and buddies. I make, using my wall analogy, Kevin, just me, and it doesn't have to be like my way is the best way, but this is the Kevin way. I keep a wall of neutrality as a general rule with most city employees, the vast majority of city employees, okay? Because I need to take a neutral perspective. But the problem with that is when you do keep a neutral perspective, oh, what? I thought you were my friend and blah, blah, blah. Just because we're friends and we've been friends for many, many years, I will still say it like it is about that person or any other person in here, okay? Which is what, by the way, brought up this most recent thing that some hubbub was made about, right? I don't put my personal relationships over my commitment to do this job in the very best way I can do, okay? And that's where I put my priorities, all right? But that has now, I've lost friends over it, or quote unquote, air quote, friends. They weren't really my friends. Sometimes these people are friends because they want something out of you, all right? I make it real crystal clear to everybody, if it isn't real crystal clear by now, anybody that knows my reputation, it's job one, I give and look out for the voters, okay? That's where my priorities lie. And sometimes I have to deliver bad news, or I have to vote against something somebody wants. I have to vote against a pay raise that somebody wants, or extra vacation time when they want it. And they don't like that, okay? Because I'm supposed to just do what they want, but it doesn't work that way. So when you don't vote for the things that sometimes people want, you go from good guy to bad guy. And that's the way it works around City Hall. That's the culture here, okay? So you're either going to swim in that culture and be nice person, right? You'll be talked of as lovely because you do whatever they want. I'm not here to do whatever they want. I'm here to do what's right in my God-given perception of it, all right? So that's the deal. Having said that, I should be a gentleman. As a general rule, I should do it in a civil manner, and I should be on point. And I would also say that goes the other way here. I would also remind the mayor that he should be putting out the word to his employees and his direct employees that they shouldn't be sitting up in bars talking trash about people, okay? Which, remember, there's a lot of ears here in Holyoke, and those ears come back to Kevin. And they come back to other city councilors, and they tell me what so-and-so said. I don't go and repeat it. I don't go on social media and start bashing people. But the quote-unquote, if we're going to be all about decorum and all of this, that works all the way around, okay? Mm-hmm. So that's fine. We should be absolutely civil. We should say what we have to say. But I just am careful that you start telling people like it is on different facts and legitimate criticism. Rules like this in the future should not be interpreted to censor this council's important duty to give legitimate criticism of public officials, because if that's the case, this council has lost its role. And if people are afraid to come here, if you're fine and you have no issues, you should have nothing to be afraid of to come into this council. What I have observed from time to time is sometimes it's individuals who either have their own agenda or they're out to do other things. Not always the case, but they have had concerns and things that we've had to have what you would call euphemistically critical conversations about how government operates, how conflicts of interest are handled in here. I mean, I had one at finance. I thought the department did a nice job with it. They handled it after I made my points, but I had to make my points, and those were all legitimate points. I don't think anybody criticized me for it, but that's how I operate. That's how I do my job, and I care to believe that despite me not always being perfect, the public likes what I'm doing, ergo my 14 re-elections. So I would say, but I do agree with the point, you don't make nasty personal comments about people. That crosses a line, and we shouldn't do that. And that's totally unnecessary. So if that's where the rule's going, I'm totally embracing that. Yes. I guess the reason I went into all that is more for a historical perspective around the rule, and I know our president's here. When we're having those type of conversations, that type of dialogue and legitimate criticism, it's an important role of this council. It isn't everybody's doing great and everybody's wonderful. Yes, most people are, but there are legitimate things that need to be pointed out from time to time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Givner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to reiterate that the purpose of this order is to focus on decorum in the chambers, city council meetings, subcommittee meetings. I think it's a great idea to try to get people to act however you want them to act when they're not in the chambers, but I do think it's important that when people come to city council, they come in front of a subcommittee, when the public comes to a public hearing or has a public comment, that they can expect to be treated with respect and courtesy. regardless of what they have to say, because it is, these are the roles we've taken on as city councilors and, public servants. So I think we should keep our attention on the purpose of this order, which is decorum in the chambers and amongst, our colleagues, amongst city councilors and city employees, especially when people come before us. I have to say that I have witnessed some pretty unpleasant moments for even people who come before us who are volunteering to be on a board or a committee. So, I just want to reiterate that I can't control what happens when people are not in the chambers, but I think when we are in the chambers and having these public meetings, that we should be able to expect healthy debate, constructive criticism, and a heavy dollop of respect. Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I make a motion that we vote to approve the proposed rule change and add,
And recommend to council.
and make the recommendation to the full city council?
Madam Chair, under discussion.
No one has seconded it yet.
Oh,
So I'll second it. Yes. Councilor Bacon?
Thank you. So I will be brief, but what I do want to say is that the rule that we have now is perfectly adequate. And what we need are the people of our city council who unanimously adopted these rules to simply follow the rules. To take a rule and add a unique group of people to it will not cause people's conduct to change. The rule, as it's written right now, says no member in debate shall make any references to another member or member of the general public, but in respectful terms. So I would respectfully say the rule is adequate. We all know what it means. And if we conduct ourselves in that manner, we don't need to change the rule. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, on the motion, roll call vote. Councilor Bacon?
No.
Murphy Rumboletti?
yes.
McGrath Smith? Yes. Okay, it is late. We had some really good conversations, and I'm looking at item 6 and 7, both which are meaty, and we could be here till 10:30. So what I would like to propose is that we actually table both items 6 and 7 to the April 29th meeting to take them up for discussion at that time. And then, and if I have a second on that, then we would move to the rest of the piece,
So
which is
moved.
just to let some things move to withdraw.
So moved.
Okay, and then can we just do a quick voice vote on that? Bacon?
Yes.
Murphy Rumboletti?
Yes.
McGrath Smith? Yes. Okay, so item 8, is it okay if I just do an abbreviated reading?
Motion to suspend the rules and allow an abbreviated reading of
The items
the items.
on the agenda for the purpose of leave to withdraw? Okay,
And you
thanks.
just might want to specify items 8 through
Oh, thank you.
26.
Motion to suspend the rules to allow abbreviated reading of items 8 through 26.
Clear in the jacket, my friends. Okay, so item 8, April 6, 2021, Murphy ordered the city charter be amended so that if there is a vacancy in the mayor's office and the president of city council cannot assume the duties full-time, full council could then select another counselor. Should I read all of them? And then
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Item 9, this was 5/3/22. Isri Rivera ordered that the Honorable City Council add the following committees: Communications Committee and Senior Citizen Quality of Life Committee. Item 10, 5/3/22, also from Isri Rivera, ordered that the City Solicitor's Office begin drafting a ballot question around marijuana social consumption sites. Okay, item 11, same date, Rivera ordered that committee chairs limit the amount of public hearings added to an agenda. Item 12, Vacant and Jourdain ordered that we have a rule to allow one city council to call for an end to debate on a spending or bond issue. Item 13, Maldonado Velez, order that we add to our charter that if a counselor is absent from a full council meeting for more than 3 consecutive meetings without written consent or notice, rather, their seat is considered open. Item 14, Murphy-Ramboletti, order that city council create a rule where any candidate or elected official must disclose with the city clerk's office any federal or state litigation that may be pending. Item 15, Maldonado Velez, ordered that a fund be implemented for a series of studies rotating between city departments to study best practices. Item 16, Puelo and Vacan, ordered that recall positions be established for every elected official in the city. Item 17, Maldonado Velez, ordered that we create a ballot question asking if there should be a recall process for elected officials. Item 18, this was a communication from Mayor Josh Garcia vetoing an order concerning retaining independent counsel to work with city council and the legal department. Item 19, McGee and Jourdain ordered the City Council Rule 7B be amended to add to the end that 10 minutes of response time will be allowed for councilors to address and answer questions or comments. Item 20, Givner with community support ordered that a 30-minute public comment period be added to City Council meetings. Item 21, Puelo ordered that we consider a ballot question to determine if the term of office for mayor should be reduced to 2 years. Item 22, a communication providing article on Juan Montano arrest. Item 23, Maldonado Velez ordered that City Council take necessary steps towards imposing term limits for all elected officials. Item 24, Puelo Vacan ordered that a new rule regarding proclamations be established. When a proclamation is issued by City Council recognizing good behavior, citizenship of a person, it should be withdrawn upon discovery and documentation of repeated criminal convictions. Item 25, Divine J. Rivera Givner ordered that Rule 8 Decorum Speaking, Section C, during debate, if objection is given thereto, no member shall speak more than twice to the same question. And item 26, Divine Rivera Givner ordered Rule 7 Agenda, Section 2, delete all words after the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay.
Motion,
To
well, we
give-
already, motion to give these items 8 through 26 leave to withdraw?
Second.
Under discussion? Okay, on the motion? Vacan?
Yes.
Murphy-Ramboletti?
Yes.
McGrath-Smith, yes. Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes,
Second.
ma'am.
Good meeting. Nice job.
Thank you. And thank you all who attended from council. Thank you.